Good morning. How we doing today? This is James Sweeney, aka SplitSuit. Welcome back to another video. And this is going to be part 5 of the Preflop strategy and range quiz. This is a 10-part series where we go through Preflop range building, we go through line creation, and of course, focus totally on how to play stronger Preflop poker. So if you've already taken this quiz, awesome. If you haven't, maybe pause here. I'll leave a link in the description box. You can take it, come back, and enjoy. And without further ado, let's talk about this hand from Live 2-5. Alright, so in this situation, we are in middle position 1 with roughly 200 big blinds effective. We open to 20 bucks, and the cutoff is a solid tag who 3-bets to 80. So what range in percentage form do you think the tag is 3-betting with in this situation? So if we were to graph all of the answers that we got from more than 2,000 players, here's what we're looking at from a 0% range of hands to a 100% range of hands. We are looking at a median answer of somewhere around 9% and an average answer around 13%. And you notice there's a lot of tight bunching, right? A lot of the answers are kind of floating in between like 5% and 15%. Very few answers above 30. Most of them very, very concentrated here. And what that means to me is that there's a lot of agreement. There's a lot of confidence in that answer range, right? A lot of people are not thinking, hey, it's going to be 80% here. A lot of people kind of in that 10-ish to 13% range. So let's start with that and graph that in Flopzilla to see what that actually looks like. So truth be told, building any sort of re-raise range preflop can be a little bit challenging, and here's why. Let's say we were to plug in a 13% 3-betting range preflop. This is all depolarized, so it's everything up in that top left-hand quadrant, right? We have 8s plus, we have ace 10 plus, we have some suited connectors like jack 10 suited, 10-9 suited, but really it's all mashed up in that top left-hand corner. Now, some people will 3-bet a depolarized range in certain situations, maybe all the time, but more often than not, this is what a roughly 13% depolarized range is going to look like. But not everyone 3-bets depoled, and not everyone 3-bets all situations depolarized. Maybe he 3-bets polarized in this situation, which means maybe he flat calls something like 8s, something like 9s, something like 10-9 suited, something like ace 10 off, whatever. And that means there's clearly a gap here between the range of hands that we are currently assigning and the range of hands that we think they're actually 3-betting. So that needs to be built up somewhere. And the question is, are they 3-betting then ace deuce suited kind of hands? Are they 3-betting ace deuce offsuit kind of hands? What about king 5 suited? What about like suited double gappers, right? All of a sudden there can be a lot of question here in terms of how the rest of those hands are being built. So when I'm thinking about a 3-betting range here, I ask myself, do I think this is a polarized range or a depolarized range? And if polarized, how big of a chunk is the bluffy or the weaker stuff going to be? If I have information on how that's built, awesome. If not, I might just look at this as a 2-part pie chart. The value stuff and how much of the pie that makes up, and then the weaker stuff and how much of the pie that makes up. So when I'm looking at the actual situation, one of the major questions I'm asking myself is, are there any factors that would influence the cutoff to 3-bet wider versus flat more often? For instance, let's say that one of the players in the blinds is a fish. I don't think the cutoff is then always going to 3-bet ace queen or ace jack kind of hands. It might make more sense for them to flat, let the fish come along as well. They can utilize their position against both players and go forward from there. So think about that, right? And because this person is a solid tag, they're probably thinking ahead. But when they're looking at a super nit and a weak tag in the blinds and an unknown person on the button, is that really going to influence them to flat any wider or 3-bet any wider? I don't think they're going to go out of control here. I'm really focused on if there's fish involved though, and how the tag would bend their 3-betting range accordingly. So personally, if I were in this situation and building the range that I think this person would 3-bet with, I might start with something like this. I think this is probably pretty fair. Maybe they only 3-bet 10s plus and not 9s, fine. Maybe ace jack gets a little bit more into the flatty range, and maybe king queen offsuit becomes more flatty as well. So you know this is only 5% of hands. So if they are truly 3-betting 13%, well, clearly 8 over 13, that's how often their range is going to be more bluff centric, and that could be, again, anything from ace deuce to queen 10 to 4-3 to pocket deuces that they randomly turn into a 3-bet bluff. Unclear. All it tells me is that there's a large chunk of that pie that's going to be comprised of weaker hands, and that's clearly going to influence the way that I respond to that 3-bet, both in terms of do I 4-bet it, do I flat it, and how do I want to play post-flop. Either way it goes. And to just make two final comments here, here's what I would say. I think that the 3-betting range here is probably going to be about 10%. I don't think it's going to get as wide as 13%. It may, but I think if you did 10% as a default starting point, I think that would be a little bit better and a little bit closer. The other thing that I'll say here is that I would assume that this is going to be shaped in a polarized way, which is nuts and not nuts, as opposed to depolarized, which is nuts and close to nuts kind of hands. So if you're building it, I think that is the way that I would start with it, and that would be my default way of building the cutoff's 3-betting range in this situation. But moving on to part 2 of this question is this. So they 3-bet the button, small blind, and big blind fold. We look down at ace king offsuit, and the question is, what is your play here? So looking at what everyone said they would do here, about 50% of people said they would 4-bet, about 47% of people said that they would call, and about 3.5% of people said that they would fold. Now, personally, I think folding is totally out of the question here, especially if we really think that the tag is 3-betting somewhere between 9 to 13% of hands. I think it is far too tight to just fold here and let him take advantage of us that way. If we're folding one of the absolute strongest hands in our range, we are allowing him to 3-bet us far too often, and he's 2 to our left. He's going to have position on us a lot of the time in this session, and that is going to make our life a living hell, something I definitely do not want to do. So folding, no thank you. For me, it's just between 4-betting and calling the $60 more. Personally, I think calling is going to be far better in this situation. I think it's a situation where you don't really want to get into a 200 big blind pissing match pre-flop. If you have information that you can do that, or that the tag is very likely to get 200 bigs in pre-flop with a range that we do well against, sure, but I think overall you're probably going to do better by flatting, utilizing your edge, and if the tag is 3-betting a lot of second best hands, right, whether it's like ace deuce offsuit or ace 3 suited or suited connectors, suited gappers, whatever it is, we're going to do just fine post flop. I mean, yes, we're out of position, that sucks. Yes, we missed the flop a large chunk of the time, but 4-betting just because of those reasons is something that I'm not super on board with, especially at this stack depth where we can make some major mistakes, whether it's always 4-bet committing, whether it's always 4-bet folding. You can make some huge errors by doing that, and I'd personally much rather flat, utilize my edges, both my skill edge and also my equity edge, and just go forward from there. Now, truth be told, there are a lot of variables at play here, and these are things that will heavily impact your win rate at the end of the day, especially as you're planning on moving up, playing against more competent opponents, playing against more pre-flop progression. You need to know this stuff, especially with Ace King. So I invite you to check out my new book, Optimizing Ace King. We discuss things exactly like this: 3-bet, 4-bet, 5-bet wars, why the idea of if I 4-bet I can never fold to a 5-bet is inherently wrong, and how to handle post-flop wars in 3-bet pots, in 4-bet pots, since these are situations that will heavily impact your win rate, especially in more aggressive games. You can check it out at splitsuit.com/AK. That's A as in ace, K as in king. Check it out, and this will be something that will definitely help your win rate in the long run and help prepare you for playing not only in the games you're playing today, but the games you want to play tomorrow. And that is going to wrap it up for this video. Again, I think you guys were definitely in the ballpark here in terms of what to do. I think the 3-betting range was in the ballpark of what was correct. I think the overall idea of not folding to the 3-bet was definitely correct, but I think there's some nuanced understandings in terms of looking at that actual 3-bet range and then actually crafting your line when you're facing that 3-bet, even with a hand as strong as Ace King, is very important. And I will be the first to admit stack depth is a key factor in this situation. So as always, if you have any comments or questions, please don't hesitate to let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you back shortly with part 6, where I have some more fun finishing up this series. And if you need anything at all, please don't hesitate to let me know. Otherwise, as always, good luck out there and happy grinding.